Welcome, and thank you for taking part in the People's Global Summit and for joining us for this important panel. My name is Catherine Wehrman, and I am the Steering Committee Chair for the Global Social Service Workforce Alliance. Our co-host for the panel is the National Association of Social Work's International Committee. The Global Social Service Workforce Alliance is a member-based organization that works to ensure that the social service workforce is well-planned, developed, and supported in countries and communities across the globe. We do this by serving as a convener for collective learning, by advancing knowledge, and building the capacity of humanitarian and development actors. Our work includes the creation of evidence-based resources and tools and advocacy for workforce policy reforms. Our co-host, the National Association of Social Workers in the United States, is the largest membership organization of professional social workers in the world. NASW works to enhance the professional growth and development of its members and maintains professional standards, as well as advocates for just social policies. Its international committee promotes member education and mobilization on international issues and provides organizational guidance on issues pertaining to the protection of human rights in the global context. Our panel today could not be more timely. Armed conflict in Ukraine continues to devastate the country, forcing nearly 7 million people to seek asylum in other countries. In northern Ethiopia, millions are struggling to survive because of devastating conflict. Tragically, protracted conflict continues to impact millions in many other parts of the world. At the same time, the climate crisis presents an immediate threat to the lives and livelihoods of many and is projected to increase in both numbers affected and severity. While largely unrecognized and undervalued, social service workers are on the front lines, helping individuals and communities prepare for, respond to, and recover from such emergencies. They bring the skills, knowledge, and commitment to identify, reach, assess, and engage those most in need. Unfortunately, these workers often do not receive the support, resources, or training they need to deliver their much needed services more effectively. Today's panel features highly experienced social service practitioners who have worked in emergency settings. They will share their personal experiences, challenges, and opportunities they see, as well as lessons they have learned. From them, we will gain insights into how social service workers can be better prepared and supported when working in emergency contexts. To further enrich what you learned today, I encourage you to have a look at the Global Social Service Workforce Alliance 2022 State of the Social Service Workforce Report that features social services in emergency contexts and further illustrates the critical role of the workforce in emergency settings. It also explores the key challenges in deploying social service workers in global emergencies, along with key recommendations to ensure that the workforce is better able to carry out its efforts. The report will be available on the Alliance website in late July. Throughout today's panel discussion, be sure to submit questions to any of our panelists using the chat feature. If your question is for a specific panelist, please note this. I would now like to introduce our panel moderator, Dr. Lena Dominelli. Dr. Dominelli holds a chair in social work at the University of Stirling in Scotland, where she is also the director of the program on disaster interventions and humanitarian aid. She is widely published in social work, social policy, and sociology. She also currently chairs the International Association of Schools of Social Work's Committee on Disaster Interventions, Climate Change, and Sustainability, and has the distinction of representing the social work profession at the UN discussions on climate change. Welcome, Dr. Dominelli.
Thank you, Kathy. That was a wonderful introduction. I'm not sure I deserve it, but it made me feel good. Let's put it like that. So thank you for that. And welcome, everybody. A warm welcome to you all. Kathy, I could say that you have introduced the context so well. There's very little left for me to say. But there is a wee bit left, as we'd say in Scotland. So I'm just going to add to what you said, because I think we're at a crossroads as a profession, especially because we have the things that you said are really important: climate change, war, which has never really stopped. It just moves around different parts of the globe, and now has hit Western Europe in a terrible way. But war is terrible everywhere. We also had and have still the COVID health pandemic. And then I would say you layer all that on top of other things that we're all very familiar with, like the professionalization of social work, which in many countries still is a goal to be achieved. I know it's different in the US, but the US is one country among many. It's also really important, and you highlighted this, that we value social workers and social work as an evidence-based, very knowledgeable group of practitioners and academics, and we should celebrate our achievements, but they usually are not. And certainly in the UK, it was very embarrassing for me because I love the NHS. And every Thursday during the first lockdowns, we used to go out and clap for everyone. And you'd see these big signs saying, "Thank you, NHS." And I said to my neighbors, because, you know, you had to talk to them across the fences, I said, "Where's the thing saying thank you to social care workers and social workers who are also risking their lives?" But we know 98 of them have died. Social workers, that is, qualified social workers, because you can't call yourself a social worker unless you're registered and qualified here in the UK. So I think that's another thing. And then together, all this combines into new demands for our curriculum. And these vary from kind of issues around new theories for practice, to the new practice wisdoms, to including environmental justice within social justice, including and of course, always research. So I am going to stop there because I'm very aware of the time. And I think Helena is going to keep us on track on that one. So welcome, Elena. That's a very important role. And Elena is also going to make sure that I don't miss any of the questions on the chat. But before we get on to that exciting part of the program, I think we are very fortunate to have three distinguished panelists. And what I will do is introduce each one of them in turn and give them 5 minutes each so that they can tell you about themselves and what it is that attracted them to disaster social work and what they've learned through their experiences. And the aim of these brief introductions is to give the audience an opportunity to think, oh, I really want to find out more about that particular piece of work. So it is really because it's a membership-based organization, an audience participatory session. So I'm going to start with the first person on our panel, which is Nurul Eka Hidiati. Is that correct? I do apologize for my horrible mess of it.
Okay.
Thank you. Eka is a very, very distinguished social worker in Indonesia. She has been the chair of the Indonesian Association of Social Workers. She's played a really important role in getting discussions going around disasters and is really committed to improving policy and practice in the area. And she's been so important in human rights, psychosocial social work, mental health, and I could go on, but she's also the Secretary General of the Social Work Consortium in Indonesia. So her impact is quite widespread. And she holds, of course, a master's in social welfare, a diploma in social work, and is completing a dissertation at the University of Indonesia. And if it's in social work, I probably know your head of department, but we won't go into that at the minute. I'll talk to you about that later. So over to you for 5 minutes to introduce yourself beyond the few things that I've said about you and to tell us about your work in disasters and why it's important and what you've learned from it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the introductions, Professor Dominelli. Good evening from Jakarta. My name is Eka. I'm going to start with a little bit introductions about Indonesia. Indonesia is an archipelagic country that located in an area prone to disaster due to geographical, geological, and demographic factors. The tsunami incident in 2004 became a kind of a wake-up call, not only for Indonesia, but also internationally. One form of international response was the Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reductions 2015 and 2030. So the 2004 Aceh tsunami incident was a national awakening where national awareness rose about the importance of regulation that built an improvement in the disasters management system. Then the law on disasters management was passed in 2007. One thing that I consider as important and should be noted is that the challenges of global disaster, the presentation of their occurrences continue to increase related to hydrometeorology, such as floods, landslide, tropical cyclone, and drought. And this puts many countries, including Indonesia, at the highest risk. Throughout 2022, during the last 6 months in Indonesia, more than 90% of disaster incidents are related to floods, landslide and extreme weather, tidal wave and aberration. So serious effort from all of us in responding to disaster caused by hydrometeorological factors is very important. Nationally, Indonesia has been equipped with laws and set of rules and regulation. This is a legal umbrella has become a mandate for the protections of the people from disaster risk. And I would like to start a little bit about the context of social work in Indonesia. Unfortunately, there is still a limited public understanding or acceptance of professional social work, even though we already have social worker law in 2019. Limited distinct role for social worker in government services, unclear role and authority for social worker in human service organization, etc. But crisis opens opportunities for change. Through disasters management, we see a great opportunity to build recognition of the social work profession and an opportunity to strengthen social workers. And I would like to emphasize the unique role and skills for social work in disasters management in Indonesia. There are unique contributions of social work here. There are knowledge of human needs and social service system, mean linking and connecting. A biopsychosocial spiritual perspective means building strengths and resilience, an assessment that focus on needs and resources. And we also recognize the important role of local social workers. They become a member of clinical psychosocial emergency team. Their role at administrator for of distribution system, as crisis and restoration case manager, as supervisor of teams and community psychosocial workers, group services, and helping the helper. This is very important support to support a fellow social workers or other human resources like volunteers in the field. So the skill of social worker needed in crisis situation, there are crisis case management, psychological debriefing, trauma assessment, counseling, assessment of need and vulnerability, social mapping, rapid community needs assessment, organizing skill in fundraising, rapid planning and mobilizing volunteers, administrative and supportive supervision, training of government workers and volunteers, and working in interdisciplinary team building. So the role of social work organization or association, it is also very important in building network and marketing with the government, local and international NGOs about social work contribution in disaster management. Defining a social work role in all phases of disaster linking to curriculum, develop training material for volunteers and social work supervisors. And another role is defining a social work role in mitigation. The unique of contribution of social worker in disasters management are in work in larger system as well as with individual families and groups. Its phases in disaster management in pre-crisis, during the crisis, restoration and rebuilding requires a different set of skills that need to be recognized, explored, and must train for social worker. So the most important thing, in my opinion, is to provide support as early as possible and quickly and adequately to social workers who are in disaster or crisis situation, especially for social workers who show signs of being affected by disaster. I think that's it for my introductions. Professor Dominelli, back to you. Thank you. You still unmute?
Sorry. Yes, you reminded me in your whistle stop tour of so much about activities in Indonesia around the 204 tsunami and the many other issues that you face. And I was really quite interested in the way that it had impacted on your curriculum. So plenty of material there for us to ask you questions on later on. So thank you so much. I will now go to our next speaker, who is Dr. Abu Bakar Al-Hassan Bichi. I hope I've got it right. Abu Kadar, have I?
Well, it's Abu Bakar Al-Hassan Bichi.
Okay, thank you. Would you like, just a sec, I was just going to say a few things about you. Dr. Bichi is from Nigeria, a medical social work background, which is quite unusual, at least in people in my experience, except I currently have one student on my MSc in master's program who is a medical doctor from the same part of northern Nigeria as you. So it's a small world. So I'm very happy to welcome you. And I think you have so much to tell us because northern Nigeria has many different kinds of disasters that go well beyond medicine. So I would like you to have 5 minutes to tell us about your experiences and why you are interested in disasters as a social worker. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Leonard. Like he said, my name is Abubakar Al-Hassan Biti. I am a hospital-based social worker. As you know, Nigeria is an African continent, and it has a population of about above 200 million people. And I'm based in the northern Nigeria, specifically in the northeastern part. Nigeria.
Sorry, you're breaking up.
Come again?
You broke up. I didn't hear what you said after the 2 million people in Nigeria. I don't know if the others.
I said Nigeria, is situated in the African continent with over 200 people, 200 million people population. And we have quite many of disasters, natural disasters and man-made disasters. Part of the natural disaster we mostly experience is flooding. When it is during rainy season, most of the people are being displaced from their habitats to some other places. Then with the insurgency that ravaged the northern Nigeria, especially the northern eastern part, beginning from 2011, 12, 13, 14, 15, up to 2021. In fact, up to this year, a lot of people are displaced from their original habitat to IDP. So the work that social workers are given there is enormous, ranging from psychosocial support, ranging from repatriating them back as it is now, taking them back to their original habitat, etc., etc. People, yes, you have to give them psychological intervention. Some you have to give them, you have to provide food for them. You have to find where they will be settled. That's in the aspect of insurgency. Then when there is always strike, when the insurgents strike in terms with the bomb blast, they are being taken to the hospital and they have to require medical attention, emergency medical attention that is being provided. You have to sort out, sometimes you have to know how to get their lost relatives. You have to connect them, you have to connect them to their relatives. You have to take after the medications, the treatment, because for somebody that has suffered from bomb blast, you don't expect him to have anything to say, so you have to know how to advocate on behalf of the victims to get the resources, to mobilize resources that will take care of them. Because as it is in the Nigerian situation, there is no specific, there is no outline, defined policy that patient of such should be taken care of. Sometimes the state government, where the incident occurs, is what they make promise that they should be taken care of. So as a social worker, you have to mobilize resources to make interventions, to make sure they receive the treatment they require. And of course, you have to offer psychological and psychosocial counseling to them. Some that must have suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder, also you have to support them with some psychosocial intervention. So many things. So like I told you, I'm in a medical care. When you have road crashes, that is emergency also. You have to bring them to hospital. At that situation, they are not having any money to pay. As you know, healthcare is not free to some extent. They only give some hours, let's say they can take first 24 hours, but after then, and when you bring somebody from the crash scene, you don't expect him to have money, so you have to intervene, you have to connect, you have to find out where he came from, you have to family, you have to give them more, or you have to take them. Sometimes you get unknown corpses, which you have to keep them in the morgue, in mortuary. You have to find out where the relatives come from. In a situation wherever you cannot locate the relatives, you have to do coroner, you have to go to the police, the court, so that you go and bury the corpse, you keep the record in kept. After some time, the relative might reassess. And of course, we have so many other emergencies, medical emergencies that we intervene. As you know, Nigeria, despite the most powerful nation in the African continent, yet it's a developing nation. We still suffer from mortality rate. So you find out a lot of rural women are being brought to the hospital and they cannot deliver. They have to undergo some cesarean section, which mostly they cannot afford. You have to intervene as a social worker for them to get operated, at least to save the mother, to save the child. And at the same time, we have some psychiatric emergencies in the country. We have federal psychiatric hospitals across the subnational, 6 subnational, what they call 6 geopolitical zone in the country. So also we have such kind of social worker, which the psychiatric social workers, which they provide psychosocial counseling, community. They engage the patient in terms of rehabilitation, in terms of community care, follow-up after discharge, to reconnect the family, how the community will accept him. So there are quite many of emergency situations. Unlike that, we have never experienced things like tsunami. We have never experienced things of like earthquake. So these are some of the emergencies, like I mentioned earlier, that we are having in Nigeria. And of course, sometimes in the community, you will have some cases that require GVV, that is genital mutilation, where you have cases of it that are being brought to the hospital, counsel the parent, you have to counsel the victim, then you have to engage police so that they apprehend the culprit, so that you make the victim to undergo some medical services to ensure that it's not getting any infection from the alleged suspect. So much. So thank you very much. This is a little I can talk because I want to make sure I limit within the 5 minutes.
Yes, you did. Thank you very much for that. Very interesting, kind of showing to us how complex the situation is if you're a medical social worker and you're trying to straddle responding to people and their medical needs plus their social, psychosocial, and counseling needs and link families together. So thank you for that. And I'm sure there's loads of questions there that people will be dying to ask you. But we'll move on to introduce our third speaker. So I'm very pleased to introduce, she's now become a friend. I only met her on the 24th of February online. And that is Dr. Oksana Boyko from the Kiev, and I still haven't got my full head around the name of your institution, Oksana, the National University of Kiev, and I don't really remember.
Mohila, Kiev Mohila Academy.
Mohila, thank you, Academy. So I want to say that Oksana is an amazing person who has managed to be a practitioner in conditions of war, a social work academic who was worried about her students graduating and asking everybody else to help her so that they did, and also a just very warm human being who is really committed to our profession. So welcome, Oksana. I'm going to let you introduce yourself because you'll be able to pronounce your words much better than me.
Thank you very much, dear Lina, for such a nice and warm welcoming. And thank you so much for introducing me. My name is Oksana Boyko. I am representing here the social work profession from Ukraine, actually. And over the last 22 years, I'm in social work education, research and practice. And actually social work is quite a young profession in Ukraine. It's around 27 years old which is a young, like a young woman or a young man, yes, of the age. And I now for the last 2 years, I have been chairing also the School of Social Work faculty at my university, which is titled as National University of Kyiv Mohyla Academy. I'm also a graduate of master program in social work, as well as the first in Ukraine PhD program in social work. So we have all the 3 cycles of education in social work, and I started from the ground, from the roots, and just I became the first university diploma holder of this PhD in social work, which I'm very proud of. And thank you for your nice words in terms of my contributions to developing. I'm doing a lot together with all my colleagues, to make the profession even stronger. And you at the beginning, when Professor Kathy Werkman and you, dear Professor Dina Dominelli, were talking about the need of research, practice, evidence-based actually practices as a core for developing, for professionalization of social work across the world, but also about indigenization, also about being aware of indigenized knowledge. And my colleagues have shared already some of it, and I would like to bring some of my context into your understanding. So I'm originally from Ukraine, actually. I was born in Ukraine, and my childhood, so the disaster that I remember from childhood is Chernobyl, which of course remember Chernobyl catastrophe, which was very well known across the world. So we also have, from time to time, we've been having different floods in Carpathian Mountains. So these are the types of disaster that I've experienced. Also some landslides, also there, enterprises disasters, but if to speak about the most serious challenge that we are having now is, of course, it's the war. So it's not even the conflict or armed conflict, but it's the real war of Russia against Ukraine, which the first stage of it started since 2014, and the second active invasion stage actually started 5 months ago in February this year. So war brings a lot of things together with it, and we have right now, you can imagine, for the country with the population of 42 million people, we have 8 million of internally displaced people, as well as we have 6.5 million of people who became refugees in other countries across the world. So at least 1/3 of populations are forced displaced people, either internally or externally. So, and this, of course, was a great challenge for all of us, and especially for me, as you told, who has always been an educator, but also a practitioner in the first instance, a social work practitioner. What I always was passionate about is about community resilience, community work, and community mobilization for action. And actually, after the first, I would like to bring some of my experience from the first stage. After the first stage of the war, active war, 2014, there was a huge craze of social work profession importance, and there were lots of trainings launched in terms of preparing social workers to different types of disasters, including armed conflicts, wars, and etc. But actually, mainly they were happening at the east of Ukraine, because, as you know, east of Ukraine and Crimea were occupied, and cut from Ukraine by Russia. So, and I would say that if we say in terms of preparedness in 2022, so it's I could hardly say that we were prepared in such a very good way, like social workers should be. So we had in 2017, 2016, I was leading the project and conducting lots of trainings for social workers, social work practitioners, on introducing resilience concept, as well as introducing the interagency standing committee guidelines on mental health and psychosocial support in Ukraine. We were actually indigenizing this conceptual document, as well as trying to understand how we can fit within our current context. Right now, 6 years have passed, and right now we have resilience as the most fashionable concept, and ISC guidelines are of huge help for all of us. But still, we have had for the last over 6 years trained several hundreds, over thousands professionals, social workers who use this concept in their activities, but still we turned out to be that we were unprepared. Also, as a community crisis manager, I'm working in the communities affected by war. Actually, for the last 5 months, but for the last 2 years, the communities affected by war in the east of Ukraine, which were originally back to 2014, very close to front lines. Yes, and war never stopped. Yeah, since that time, and we were developing the community crisis models centers actually together with Norway colleagues, Norway Center for Trauma and Crisis and Suicide Prevention, and actually after the war broken up, we, together with people from communities, social workers from communities, and psychologists and PSS volunteers, actually, we came to conclusion that we need another type of community crisis management centers where we which could be like hubs, which we have all across Ukraine right now. And this is a very interesting model that maybe if I would have more time to talk about, because 5 minutes is not enough. And I see that 5 minutes, I'm running already, yeah. And it's a model that actually in before the war, it was, for terrorism disasters like ad hoc for 3 to 5 days created within the community, like based at intersectoral cooperation. But now during the war, we have been reviewing right now together with all the social workers engaged and psychosocial staff. And it's a challenging process because we need to review it in terms of war response, of social work. And bring all together, bring all the resources, do assets mapping, ensure referral, and etc. Thank you very much, dear colleagues, and I'm very grateful to all of you, and we'll be looking forward to your questions to go deeper into enlightening all the rest of the issues. Thank you.
You'll certainly get an opportunity to to develop further your wonderful model of community engagement in war situations. I think that sounded really fascinating. But I would like to just say what we're going to do next, which is to encourage the audience to ask questions. So please, audience, have lots of questions. I have one, because you know what happens if you don't ask questions? Someone like me always has loads of questions to ask. So we do have 1 or 2 here. And I'm going to go through each person, and I just want you to be very brief in your answers so that we can get lots of people coming in. But I'm going to start with you, Eka. I think you raised a really interesting point, which most social workers are not terribly worried about talking about, and that is self-care. And you were saying how important it is for social workers, especially those who've been involved in disasters, to debrief themselves and really think about what is happening to them and how they can get support from their managers, their peers, and others. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about how self-help was conducted in Indonesia in your experience, please? You're going to have to unmute yourself, please, Eka. Eka, can you unmute yourself?
Okay, sorry. Thank you. Just a little bit confused. Yes. Actually, By regulations, I mean, for a government, there is already an article that regulates the psychological well-being of humanitarian workers. It's just the implementation that must be strengthened, disseminated, and trained gradually, not only for social worker, but also for other competent authorities, because they have to know that this is the risk as a humanitarian workers working in a very vulnerable situations, that this can be impact for the social workers. So for this, I mean, it's sometimes that, I mean, for my experience, I try to focus on getting help, you know, faced with these stressors. I sought help for a mental health professional, not only to provide the briefing, but also to help me deal with the trauma. And we finally make this kind of support a standard for social workers, providing the briefing before they return to their respective, to their home before. So after every activities, every night, we mandate social worker to talk about their experience. And from there, we try to identify, is there any sign of stress? Is there any sign of trauma? Is there any sign, the impact of secondary trauma? So if we find that our social worker show the signs, so we are going to we try to I mean, provide the briefing, and it is very helpful for them, because during the briefing they will how do you say it? They will talk, they will share about their fear, about their worries, and etc. and etc. So this is a kind of support that what we did in response about the importance of maintaining the welfare of social worker. And this material was included in our practice of standard and guideline, as well as provide it in trainings. And we also implementing the psychological first aid. The psychological first aid not only for the people that for this community that but also for the social worker, also for other humanitarian workers. I think that's the way we respond for these stressors.
Thank you very much. I mean, I was delighted to learn that A, you have a very good set of laws that make it a requirement, and B, that the practice you described sounds like a good model for good practice, because certainly in my experience, I have very rarely been debriefed in disaster situations. I go out and find my own debriefing because I know it's essential. So that was very, very good. Thank you so much for that. So I will come back to you after I go around everyone with their other question. Abu Kadar, I would like to ask you a question, which is about how in the Nigerian context, do you have a standard procedure that you use for rescuing disaster victims in a crisis? And is it different in each region of Nigeria, because it is very different in regional terms? And how do you fit international helpers within this wider framework, if there is one? So that's really two questions in one, isn't it? Is there a standard procedure for rescuing disaster victims in a region? And is it the same in every region? And how do international helpers come in to help you in that process? So Abu Kadar, would you like to unmute yourself, show
Are
yourself?
you asking about standard procedure, right? Hello?
Yeah. It was. Do you have?
About
Do you
standard
have?
procedure. You know, Najib, are you asking of the standard procedure of attending to disaster victims?
Yes. Whether there is
Okay, fine.
a standard procedure or whether it's left to the people on the ground to develop it as they go along.
No, mostly it's a kind of teamwork that involves the sometimes there is an organization, public organization that is called National Emergency Management Agency, which when there is any disaster, they will come on board. Then it depends on the disaster anyway. You know, if it is like flooding, they will have to start evacuating the victims. When they evacuate the victims, it's now follow on where to relocate them. Sometimes in some public buildings, like public schools, or some buildings that government provide for that purposes. When you evacuate them, you took them there, they become internally displaced persons. So some provisions are being made by the government. Hospital personnel will come and attend to them to find out those that might probably require some medical intervention. Then, of course, social workers also come in the area of providing psychosocial support, identifying family households, identifying where they come from, starting of where, what to give them, how to get resources, mobilize resources on what to give them in terms of their needs, in terms of their feeding, in terms of their clothing. Sometimes you find a lot of people lost most of what they possess. So these are mainly in terms of clothing. And in terms of like a fire disaster or sometimes building collapse, it also involves a holistic contain a lot of different professionals. But normally, this agency that is called NEMA is one they are heading the rescue mission, whereby they evacuate the victims, take them to safer place. So these are normally how it's being practiced. Like what happened last some few months ago when there was a building collapse in Lagos, you involve security personnel, humanitarian workers, but under the leadership of this national management agency. Some states do have the state-owned emergency agencies, but they work together as like a teamwork. So after evacuation, then the responsibility now will become decentralized. This professional, this is what they are expected to do. This year, but in all, one who has much more multiple roles, mostly as social workers, because they have much more multiple roles. If you take like nurses, they only take look after the medical aspect, including doctors. But as social workers, you give support where they are kept, their camps, and as well as you go back also to community to do some person work. So you relate between the victim and the community. You do that. There are many being carried out by social workers. I don't know whether I answered your question.
Yes, I think you did, but I wonder if I could follow up with just one very quick one about the interrelationship between the local people who are responding to the needs of the victim survivors and the international aid that comes to you, because it seems to me that in the foster system, you expect them to behave, but often that does not happen if they're little NGOs that just think they're just coming there to help. They just want to get on with it.
You know, there are many multinational and international organizations that do give support, ranging from organization like IOM, organization like ICRC, support towards resettlement, shelter provisions, medical provisions, and of course to the local people. Of course, they are of great help because sometimes you will find out those that are not affected by the disasters, they tend to accommodate some of the victims in their own personal home, a kind of communal support and communal living. So the support is coming from many ways, from the government, from the multinational agencies, as well as from the local community, all in order to provide succor to the victims. Did that answer your question?
That's fine. Thank you very much. I'm now going to move on to Oksana. There are several questions for you, Oksana, but I'm going to invite you to talk to us about this model that was developed in 2014 in Eastern Ukraine to support people who were victims, survivors of disasters, but also the training that you engaged in to get social workers prepared, and how this then was transferred to the 2022 war against Ukraine. Can I invite you to do that, please?
Yes, please. Thank you so much for your question. So if I understand you right, so the question is about, first of all, the model of the community crisis management centers, which is actually the model of information community crisis centers, because the emergency services, police and ambulance are doing their work in parallel, but in cooperation with the community center. And the community center is, the model includes actually a social worker, volunteer, and psychologist, or any psychosocial staff who is able or capable to provide first psychological aid in the first instance, and a humanitarian worker who can help with any humanitarian needs to be provided. And they are working and cooperating with the local authorities, with the police, with medical, with the doctors actually, and with the emergency services, with those who are the first responders actually. So, and that was developed actually only 2 years ago, not back to 2014, because in 2014 we were not prepared at all to the crisis related to IDPs and the actual war at the east of Ukraine. So I would say that the situation still dramatically differs from 2014 and 2022, because right now we as social workers are much more prepared to dealing with these issues. We know we have legislation for IDPs. We have also a range of regulations which help to understand the way for IDP, the way for all the vulnerable populations to receive their aid, and for social workers as a framework to provide support to them. And I would like to say that the regulation on supervision that we as social workers contributed to was actually appearing for social workers, supervision for social workers as a mandatory one appeared actually after 2014. That we just joined it. And if to speak about the model itself, right now we are going to, so we've been going to pilot it before the war, but right now we are changing it because of the war. And I think that would be a topic for a next global summit, to discuss how it was functioning during the war, because we have 3 different models in 3 different communities, but the core of it is social and psychological support, and social workers providing needs assessment, providing referral within the center, or outside of the center, depending on the needs. And of course, social workers as coordinators and who were doing assets mapping, having their maps before them, when they receive, and also providers of first psychological aid, which they were trained actually quite intensively for the last several years. and that makes the process much easier in terms of prevention of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So this is what everyone has learned since 2014 and have been trained on. But also, if I talk about this, some people call this information community crisis centers. Some people are calling, having another models presented now and call them resilience hubs or something like this. But in general, right now, we have the model which is right now active and functioning. We have so-called hubs, which are called like Mi Mariupol and Mi Irpin, which means that it's like community for those people who left their communities because of the war. And this is the community in other places created like a hub where they can receive legal support and advice, social work support, assistance and referral, and actually their needs, were met. And social workers are playing the key leading role, as well as we have hubs based, humanitarian hubs, as we call them, based at the universities even. We have cases at the universities, at the public centers for social services, which are providing first psychological aid, humanitarian support, and also referral for receiving further social services.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. It does sound like you've got much material for another session some other time. I wanted to just comment very briefly, and then I'm going to let each one of you three end the session with your observations about what you've learned from the other people that you've listened to, the other two panelists, other than yourself. I just wanted to say that for me, the assault against Ukraine or Putin's war, however you want to call it, really is quite problematic for social work because there are a lot of emotions around how people feel about being attacked, who's responsible, and it is very difficult sometimes to disentangle the policies made by politicians, even if in Putin's case it's one, and the way in which the rest of the country responds, especially in the context of fake news, where they don't have access to the truth as other people see it, particularly in the case of Ukraine, so that people believe, well, we're there to help the Ukrainians. Why are they complaining? And that is quite a difficult one, I think, for social workers to deal with. And I don't really think that we have time to discuss this. I just wanted to lodge it with us because it is there in many other situations as well. Like, for example, Palestine, Israeli, Sudan, Somalia. I could go on and on. All the ones that happened in Central Asia, Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenia, and so on. So I just want to lodge it with us because it challenges us as a social justice, environmental justice, human rights-based profession to really think about what those things mean in specific contexts and how we carry them out. So I am now going to, because we have, I think, 3 minutes left, 1 minute each for each of you just to comment, not to ask a question, on what you have learned from the other two people on the panel, please. Again, we'll start with you, Eka, please. What did you learn?
Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Oksana. Thank you, Abu Bakar. I learned a lot from your experience. I think we have a very specific, unique difference, specific, unique need, but also we have shared a common things in social work, our effort in helping others. But I also, I believe that in terms of how frustrating we are in these situations, but I think we can we can focus on opportunities that we can explore with our effort in working with people that need help. And then there's always a good side from others, learning from others, even from the people that affected by disasters. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much there. Abu Kadar, would you like to say a few words? Again, 1 minute.
Yes, all I want to say is I'm very impressed that Indonesia and Ukraine, they have legislation. This is what we are battling in Nigeria. Some 5-6 years back, the National Assembly passed our bill to legislate social work activities. It took to the office of the Murtala, but he declined attend because of some bureaucratic in plan. But somebody also passed it again after some correction and some amendment, and is going to be taken. And I hope he will attend to the act, where also will be will come in that we are practicing a legislative social work. You know, as a social work law that it has some limitations. Thank you very much, and I appreciate all
Thank
of
you. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I want Oksana to have her minute too. Okay, Oksana, please.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you for such great learning points. And first of all, that all social workers need some framework, so as to help themselves and to protect themselves in humanitarian issues. And I'm happy to hear from Nuruleka about the special legislation. And I think that we have to think about it too, because we don't have a special one, especially for social workers to protect themselves in such their MHPSS. Yeah, and this is a huge issue to think about. And thank you so much to Abu Bakar about sharing your experience, because we definitely also there's much in common, and I have thoughts already what I can also take and bring to my colleagues, to my social work colleagues who are working together with me in communities, affected communities, because we are now as community mobilizers, but also fundraisers, volunteers, collecting everything from everyone. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It just remains for me to say to all of you, the panelists, the audience, and everyone else. I'm sorry we've run out of time, but I think it was quite clear the similarities and the differences, they're both there. So let's try and get together again now that we've met up and have a much longer period of time. But thank you. It was very stimulating, very interesting and informative. Thank you, Kathy. Thank you, Elena, for bringing it up. And thank you, excellent panelists.
Thank you.
Excellence, moderator.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.